Yeah, here we are, lined up with the runway. We are currently in a descent, so I'm going to pitch up a little bit, then a roll. And then we are going to go down to the runway a little bit. Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to the channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to try and teach you guys some basic aerobatic maneuvers that you can do in almost any stunt aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator and other sims. No need to buy any expensive add-ons or anything like that, because today we will only be using the default aircraft that come with the sim. We are going to start with how to fly upside down and how to steer the aircraft in that condition. Then we'll have a look at the so-called knife edge maneuver, and after that we'll combine the two previous maneuvers into one, which I like to call the inverted knife edge, which is also the most difficult of the three in my opinion. Before we can jump into the cockpit of our stunt plane, we must first understand what exactly allows an aircraft to fly inverted, and for that we need some knowledge of physics, which I'm going to give to you guys. Once we have that out of the way, the actual flying aspect should be a lot easier to understand and be more intuitive right away. But if you are someone who already knows the physics fundamentals, or you really don't like physics lessons, and you just want to fly right away, by all means skip ahead to this timestamp. But I would highly recommend you stick around for just a few minutes, you might just learn a thing or two. As always with this type of videos, I'm by no means a real life pilot or anything like that, so take everything I say with a slight pinch of salt, because all of the things I'm about to tell you are purely based off of my own experiences and watching a lot of YouTube videos and reading books. I might get some things wrong, so keep that in mind before expressing your frustrations in the comment section, much appreciated. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. To understand exactly what makes flying upside down possible, we have to know what makes an aircraft fly in the first place. Everything that has mass will be pulled down to the earth by the force of gravity, so every aircraft will have a force acting on it that pulls it down to the surface of the earth. To counteract this force and to stay in the air, the aircraft must exert an equal force in the opposite direction. This is where the wings come into play, of course. They create a lift force which defies the force of gravity. These two forces are the basis of how to understand inverted flight. You see, when an aircraft transitions from flying upright to inverted flight, what ends up happening is that the lift created by the wings and the force of gravity are pointed in the same direction. This means that there is no longer an opposite force counteracting the weight and now also the lift force of the wings. In this condition, the aircraft would not be able to sustain flight, so in order to stay level, the aircraft must create another lift force. This can be done by increasing the angle of the wings. Increasing the angle of the wings will push the oncoming air particles down, and according to Newton's third law of motion, will create a force going into the opposite direction. If this force balances out the lift and weight force, then the aircraft can keep flying once again. Notice how in order to get this angle, a pilot must push down on the flight stick. Normally when you are flying, pushing down on the stick results in a descent, but remember that we are flying inverted, so that means the control inputs will also be inverted. This part is still pretty intuitive for most beginners. It's actually steering the aircraft that is the difficult part, and which requires some practice. In straight and level flight, if you want to turn to the right, for example, you would turn the flight stick in set direction. The lift force would then be tilted into the direction you want to turn, and the lift force would then have a horizontal component, which actually makes the aircraft turn. If you are flying inverted, it's a little bit trickier. The same concept applies, that where the lift vector is pointing is where your aircraft will turn to, and if you want to turn to the right, you still have to turn the flight stick to the right as well. But the tricky part is that from the pilot's perspective, if we are flying upside down, what we see as a right turn from the back of the aircraft looks like a left turn from the pilot's perspective. So the pilot is having to steer to the right in order to go to the left, and that's not really that intuitive at first. Imagine driving in a car and having to steer to the right to go to the left, same thing. To implement this in actual flying takes some practice, but eventually you will succeed in it. And from there you will be able to fly inverted like a pro. So now that we have the theory behind us, it's now time for the fun part, the actual flight demonstration. So join me inside the cockpit. So guys, here we are inside the flight deck of our Extra 360 here, sorry 330. We are going to start with this aircraft to demonstrate our inverted flight maneuver. And so I just took off from Duxford Airport and I'm gonna turn back to the airport now. We are going to use the runway as our visual reference today to do all of our maneuvers, because that's a good reference to do this type of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to do a quick pattern here, and then you guys will join me back once we actually do the maneuvers. So here we are now turning onto our base deck, and so I wanted to take this time to explain what we are actually going to do once we reach the runway. So anytime you want to go inverted low to the ground, the best thing to do is to quickly pitch up a little bit, because you tend to lose a bit of altitude once you start doing maneuvers like this. And so you want to pitch up, then roll, and then push down on the stick to maintain a level attitude. So that's the order in which you want to go inverted. So I'll demonstrate that in just a bit. So we are approaching the runway here, overshot slightly, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and descend a little bit. The aircraft is nicely trimmed out, which does make this type of flying a bit easier. Yeah, here we are, lined up with the runway. We are currently in a descent, so I'm going to pitch up a little bit, then a roll. And then we are going to go down to the runway a little bit. And now we are flying upside down. So see, I'm now pushing down on my stick to maintain this altitude above the runway. You can fine-tune it by releasing the forward pressure just a little bit to get lower down to the runway. But to get out of inverted flight, the same thing applies, but now you push, roll, and then pull. So when getting out of the inverted flight maneuver, you want to do the opposite of when you enter it. So instead of pulling, first you want to push, then roll, and then pull. And once you enter inverted flight, you want to do the opposite. So first climb a little bit, then roll, and then push. So yeah, that's basically how to do inverted flight. Now I'm going to go back to the runway here for just a moment to demonstrate how you should turn when flying upside down. So here we are back lined up with the runway. I'm already going to go to the inverted situation here. So how to turn when upside down. So if we want to go to the left from our perspective, what you need to do is you need to turn the aircraft to the right, and as you can see, the nose is going to the left. And if I wanted to fine-tune a bit to the right, then what I'll do is I'll turn the aircraft to the left and then we'll go to the right. So I'll do this a little bit more extreme to really clarify this. So as you can see, we are pointed to the right, it seems, but we are going to the left. So that's how you should turn when flying inverted. Now we'll move on to the PITS Special, which is also a default aircraft in the sim, and then we'll demonstrate the knife edge maneuver and also the inverted knife edge, so join me there as well. So here we are in the cockpit of the PITS Special, our next aircraft for our demonstration. I did take a PITS, or a version of the PITS that comes with the Reno Air Race expansion pack, but since the PITS is also has a default version in the sim without the expansion pack, you can still use this aircraft for these maneuvers. But I just took this aircraft because I find from my experience that this aircraft is particularly good for knife edge maneuvers, so that's why I took this particular PITS with this very nice livery here. So yeah, let's go ahead and take off, and then we'll do the next part of our demonstration. So aircraft is trimmed out once again. That's pretty important during maneuvers like this. But yeah, if you're not really aware of what a knife edge maneuver is, it's basically a condition in which your aircraft is tilted towards one side and yet still flying in a straight direction. And the way you can do this is by using cross controls. So you use the pedals to steer the aircraft in one direction, and then you use the ailerons to steer in the opposite direction. So the two forces cancel each other out, the two turning forces, and then your aircraft will still fly in a straight line. So it's pretty easy to do in most aircraft, although most aircraft don't really allow for that much of a bank angle. This aircraft in particular does allow you to turn quite a lot without actually turning the aircraft. So yeah, let's head back to the airport here. The visibility in this aircraft is not really that great. There we have the airport once again. We are going to line up with the runway, just like in the previous maneuver, because we use the runway as our actual visual reference. There we go. So once we are lined up with the runway, what we are going to do is we're going to give full right rudder, and then to counteract this you want to go left aileron, and then by looking at the runway you want to fine-tune this so that you keep flying in a straight line. So here we are, full right rudder, and then you want to bank to the left until you are flying in a straight line. So in this case we aren't really turning that much. It does require a bit of fine-tuning all the way, and you can of course go a little bit more down to the runway, but you want to focus on, for example, the runway edge line here, which I'm currently using. And from the cockpit it doesn't look that spectacular, but trust me, from the spotter's perspective on the ground this is quite a nice maneuver to look at, as you probably saw during the beginning of this video. But yeah, it's pretty easy to do. You just hold the rudder to the right and then you use your ailerons to actually keep the aircraft in a straight line, and then to exit the maneuver you just release the pressure on the rudder and then you slowly level the aircraft back out, and that's it. Easy as that. So now for the last maneuver, which is the most difficult one of the three, and that's the inverted knife edge. So we are going to use a combination of flying upside down and also using the knife edge. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a loop-de-loop here to get us back to the runway. Like so. Roll back level. And we are going to go back to inverted flight, line us up with the runway. And so same thing applies here with cross controls. So we're going to go full right rudder, but to counteract this you actually want to go right aileron as well. So this time you are still using cross controls, but not in the sense that you're actually using the controls in the opposite direction, but the lift vector is still pointing in the opposite direction of the nose, which makes your aircraft fly in a straight line. So here we are. It's as you can see, a little bit more unstable and requires quite a lot of correcting, but once you get in a stable position it's basically the same as a knife edge maneuver but upside down, and it's quite fun to do actually. Something that I wasn't really experienced with myself, but after doing it a couple of times it actually isn't not that difficult as I would have expected. But yeah, so real quickly let me just do that last maneuver once again, since it might have been a little bit unclear the first time. So what you want to do is you want to go inverted first of all, and you want to line yourself up with the runway. Make sure that you are in a stable condition before you actually start this maneuver, which is something we didn't do the last time around. Yeah, since we are flying inverted now, if we kick the rudder to the right and want to stay headed to the runway, you actually want to turn in that direction with the yoke as well, until you are flying straight to the runway. And the reason why you don't need to turn to the left with your yoke is because the lift vector is now below us, and if you look on your screen you will notice that the lift vector is now pointing to the left of us while we are kicking the rudder to the right. So you have to think this way when flying upside down, that the lift vector isn't pointing up but instead is pointing down towards your feet. And once you get that in your head and you understand the physics fundamentals, you can easily interpret these maneuvers and do them in a good way. Yeah, this time around we were much more stable, as you could see. Still requires a bit of fine-tuning, but that's fine. And then to exit the inverted flight, you just push down, roll, and then pull once again. Same thing applies in pretty much every maneuver. Those were our 3 maneuvers. I hope this demonstration was helpful to you guys. If it wasn't, you can always ask me anything in the comment section and I will happily reply to your questions. Yeah, for now, if you want to see some of my other tutorials, I make a lot of them on the channel and some of them will probably pop up on the screen somewhere now. Yeah, for now, happy flying to all of you. Good luck to all of you with these maneuvers if you want to try them yourself, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.